Hey there, good to see all of you this evening for me, afternoon, morning for you, no matter where it is that you're joining. And we're super excited to get to hang out with you today. We've got the topic tonight of life after remote learning, the one-to-one classroom in 2021, because, as things have changed and as we're learning some new things and as we're getting back into things a little bit, it's interesting to see how things may have changed and what we can do going forward. So we're super excited to get to talk to you about that, share some strategies, some tips, some things that you can pull into your classroom. So my name is Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook, and over here is Holly. You want to do a quick introduction?
I'm Holly Clark. I live in San Diego, and I do the infused classroom things.
Awesome. Yeah, very good. So really, today we're wanting to dive right into this whole idea of life after remote learning. And we know that, for some people, remote learning is starting to come back around, or it hasn't totally gone away. We still are in a global pandemic, but we're starting to see the other side of it. And it's been so interesting to see how the pandemic has affected our technology situation in a lot of schools. In fact, I'm curious to see, I would ask you in the comments, would you let us know about your one-to-one situation? That's part of the title for this session, the one-to-one classroom in 2021. So I'm curious to see, let me ask it this way. Are you in a one-to-one environment, and how long have you been? Because we're curious to see how many people have been pulled into a one-to-one environment because of the pandemic, and how many of us were in a one-to-one environment before, because there are lots and lots of schools that have made the jump from not having any devices to having some because of the pandemic. And it's been pretty interesting to watch, hasn't it, Holly?
Well, it has been interesting to watch, but it's also been very interesting to hear that some schools are still not one-to-one. Even after a global pandemic, their leadership doesn't find the value in this one-to-one and technology. And then I hear some people say, well, we don't have funding. I don't think that's true anymore. There's tons of funding coming your way. So that's not the excuse anymore. And I talked to a superintendent once who said, oh, it's there. It's just a matter if you want to take the time to find it.
Yes, absolutely. Looks like in our audience this evening, we have some one-to-one vets. Check out Debbie, one-to-one for 22 years, she says. And she says she's an educational consultant, advanced learning partnerships in Richmond, Virginia. And man, 22 years.
That beats me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Holly, didn't you tell me you were one-to-one with iPod touches at one point?
No, never. I was one-to-one with e-machines was the first thing I had. And that was in the year 2000. So I'm only 21 years, and I have never met someone who has more one-to-one experience than me. So this is really fun and interesting.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's a familiar face. There's Amber Smith. Hey, Amber. Yeah. And she says, I got a new set of Chromebooks with touchscreens this year. Yeah.
Ooh.
We've been one-to-one for 4 years. I always ran off of the regular old Chromebooks without any touchscreens. So touchscreens that's definitely a nice feature.
Mm-hmm. I would not want to have touchscreens. When people ask me what should we buy for our school, I always say, buy touchscreens, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Lisa says my district's been one-to-one for 8 years. Here's Sherry Fisher saying we went one-to-one just prior to the pandemic. So there's Leslie saying one-to-one as of this year. Oh, there's Debbie saying Henrico County Public Schools. Okay, very good. So one-to-one as of this year, but only during school hours. That's the way mine were too, with a class set of Chromebooks in my classroom. Debbie, no one knew what a laptop was, and no one had ever heard of Apple when she went one-to-one. I'm loving this. This is great. And then here's Veronica, one-to-one for a couple of years. So we've got kind of an interesting mix in here. And Holly, this whole idea of being one-to-one and how the idea of one-to-one has kind of changed in light of the pandemic is kind of what we're all about this evening, right?
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I love to talk about is that we all I do a lot of Chromebook training, and people are like, oh, we got Chromebooks because they have a short battery life and a long battery life, and they turn on really quickly. And that's not why we got Chromebooks, and that's not why we got iPads, and that's not why we got Surface tablets, whatever it is. We got them so that we can put students at the center of their learning. But what happens is that teachers did not learn in a way that they were the center of their learning. They learned from a person who had the information and gave it to them. So making that shift from analog to digital in a way that we put students at the center of their learning is the shift that we want to talk about tonight. And how you do that and how you consider that in these one-to-one environments. So one of the ways that you do that is that you understand that we live in a digital world. Your students, if they are in elementary school, will graduate in the 2030s, and they will go into retirement in around 2080. So from 2030 to 2080 is going to be their work life. It is going to be digital. So if we're not providing resources digitally and ways to learn digitally, and I hate to say this, but it's kind of a form of malpractice because we're not getting them ready for their future. We can't get them ready for 1985. And listen to this statistic, Matt. I saw notifications come across your phone, and it said that from 1980, so I went to school in the 1980s, you were probably in the 90s, and in 1980, 1934 was as far away from 1980 as 2021 is from 1980. And so we thought of the 30s as like so long, you couldn't even picture it in your head. And that's kind of what kids think about the years in which we were in our formative educational time. Mm-hmm. And so we're teaching in the way that our teachers taught, but it's as far away from them as 1934. So I think that's like mind blowing if we think about it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's incredible to think. I mean, I was born, I'll just go ahead and say it. I was born in 1980. That was the year I was born in. So that date that you picked, that makes a big deal to me. That's wow. That makes you feel old, but it also, I mean, if you can put that aside, it also is an incredible perspective to have whenever you consider consider what you're doing in the classroom.
Yeah, and what your students feel. So like in 1980s and the 80s when you were in elementary school, you thought 1934, I couldn't picture it when I was a kid. There's no it was before the World War I. Right, II, sorry. And so anyway, so right now we have to become these digital pedagogists, and we have to understand the method and practice of teaching that takes into account how the purposeful use of digital tools, not just using digital tools to use them, and we're going to talk about this throughout tonight, but how the purposeful use of digital tools can increase student engagement. And student engagement is a key factor in blended learning, and empower student voice and create more meaningful learning experiences for them. So instead of asking in 2021, I just got Chromebooks or whatever the device is, what can I do now? We need to ask instead, what can the students do? What can the students do to show their learning? What can the students do to take notes on Google Keep or whatever it is? What can the students do to demonstrate their knowledge? What can the students do to talk about their learning? And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight.
That's one of the big shifts, I think. And Holly totally nailed it right on the head there. And so if you're like Brenda, who is in her 30th year of education and went one-to-one this year, finally, she says, ironically, teachers don't have devices other than desktop classroom computers, so they can't model easily, which is tough. Or all the way to Debbie, the second grade teacher who just got laptops today with the emoji from Illinois, whatever the case may be. I think that's, and that's a big question that a lot of people will talk about whenever they get those devices. Holly's heard it. I've heard it before. It's like, I've got all of these Chromebooks. Now, what in the world am I going to do with them? And I think Holly makes a really good point. She says, it's not necessarily what am I going to do with them? And I know the heart behind that question, but still, it's not necessarily what am I going to do with them, but what are the students going to do with them? And whenever we look at that using that technology, sometimes we think, okay, let's just take whatever we were doing before with all the paper and let's just switch it over to technology. And no shame in trying to make first steps
Yeah.
in that way. But that definitely shouldn't be the goal. That shouldn't be the destination. And I'm so glad that Holly has put this quote up on the screen from someone that both of us adore and appreciate, Alice Keeler, who says, paperless is not a pedagogy.
Yeah.
You know, just because you want to do it digitally doesn't mean that it's improving the learning at all. You know, this may simplify it a little bit too much, but whenever we design a lesson digitally, I'm always asking myself this. I'm always asking if the lesson was here, you know, as far as the type of learning or the amount of learning, if the lesson was here and we start to use that technology in some way, shape, or form, I want that technology to at least do this. I want it to at least bump that level of learning up. If it keeps it at the same spot, it's like, is it even really doing anything? It just makes you think. You've got all of these devices that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars by themselves, you know, multiple thousands of dollars altogether. And we hope that they're at least able to just do that, you know? So I think that's a big point right there, is that, you know, going paperless on some things, okay, that's a good step, but we really want to improve the learning, right?
And I can't wait to come back to this in a little while when we talk about upgrades and talk about how we make those changes. But one of the things, and I was talking about this today, actually, in a training that I was doing because I was on Jamboard, and one of the teachers said, a kid scribbled last year, someone scribbled all over the Jamboard. And how do you keep kids from doing that? Well, first of all, Jamboard now has revision history, but still the point is stopping kids from doing that. And so now that you have devices, when you go back, and even if you've already gone back, you can step back and do this during those first 5 days, or pick some 5 days time period. And there are so many teachers not doing this. You need to talk about digital citizenship. What you see here on the screen is what's called an Explore board, also called a multimedia text set. I call it an Explore board because it looks like a game board. And this Explore board, my students explore what kindness means, what it means in life, what it means online. And after they explore the idea of kindness, we come together and together we write an acceptable use guideline for how are we going to act now that we're all online and collaborating together. What's appropriate? Is it appropriate to go on someone else's frame or slide and write all over it? But I'm going to let them come up with that. Of course, I'm going to use my little teacher tools to help them remember this. but they're going to come up with the rules. And when they come up with them, they're going to, and I hate to use the word police each other, but they do. They're like, dude, that's not nice. We talked about that. And I don't have to spend time or deal with people going on each other's slides and messing with stuff. We talk about commenting. We talk about what does it look like to do a really good video response. We're talking about all of this from the get-go. And if we don't do digital citizenship, I promise you, you will do it later in the year via a phone call home. So starting your first 5 days with this digital citizenship and what kindness means online is key.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's like, are we going to find ourselves fighting fires, or are we going to prevent fires ahead of time? You know, and that's really what this is kind of all centering around. I like to think of it as, and I may have kind of worn this analogy out over time, but I think of it like the firm foundation.
Yeah.
You know, my wife and I were able to build the house that we're in. And, you know, of course, one of the first steps was to pour the concrete for the foundation. And if that's not, you know, perfectly, you know, plumb and level, and if it's not totally set, then, you know, your whole house suffers. And with digital citizenship, it's very much like that. So that really is one of the keys. You know, if our focus, if our title for tonight is Life After Remote Learning, the one-to-one classroom in 2021, that's definitely number one. The one-to-one classroom in 2021 doesn't leave out digital citizenship.
It has
I have the hardest time saying digital citizenship.
And I know a lot about digital citizenship lately, Matt, but we'll talk about that later.
Right.
So next.
Yes. Next is, so this is number 2. Number 1 is to not leave out the digital citizenship. Number 2 is to be consistent with the technology. So as I was saying earlier, for if you're still sort of new to one-to-one, or even if you're not, a lot of times trying to find ways to build it into your day-to-day is kind of a big deal. And sometimes I will find that teachers will go a few days without bringing the technology in, or we'll go an entire week, or we'll go 2 weeks or something. And what happens when you do that is you start to lose momentum. So I know for me, after I got sort of settled into having a class set of Chromebooks, my students always knew that as they walked in the door during passing period between my classes, I taught high school Spanish, they would always go up to the Chromebook cart, which actually looked an awful lot like the cart over here. And they would grab their Chromebooks, they would power them up, and they would get logged in, and they would go straight to Google Classroom. They just knew. And it was just that routine that we did every single day. They just didn't even think about it. But if we're not making it a consistent part of our day, and if we have those gaps, a few days or a week or a couple weeks or even longer, all of a sudden, if we decide we're going to do it, it's like, okay, I got to try to remember my password. Okay, now where do we go? And I can't remember what button I'm supposed to click on. And like all of a sudden you're wrestling with a lot of those things that could just become seamless by that point. So there's a little bit of a case to be made for, let's come up with at least small things that we can do with those one-to-one devices every day. Because what you're doing really is you're building a muscle. You're building a muscle for the students, but what you're also doing is you're building the muscle for yourself as the teacher, and figuring out how it works and what all the features are and how you can and can't use them, which will help you build better lessons later. So consistency with the technology is key.
And I even kept mine at a 45-degree angle, and it's set at their desk, just like a pencil would, or whatever it is that you're using. And then they would just open it and it's ready to go. And it's just like, when you have it in the case, it's like saying to kids, all right, let's get out your pencils or pens or whatever. And they're still in the packaging from CVS, and they've all got to open up the packaging and make sure it works. And you wouldn't do that in a classroom, and you shouldn't do that with technology. So kind of think of that metaphor to help you maybe get the inspiration you need to make sure they're always out. And another thing is that we need, so in 1980, we'll go back to that, there wasn't the cognitive research that we have now. Now we have tons of cognitive research, and it's getting even more every day. We're looking at how kids learn, what's an effective study skill, what kinds of things make learning stick. In fact, there's a book called Make It Stick that helps you understand how learning happens. And my favorite, I love this book, I was just doing this too today in my training, is this NeuroTeach. And NeuroTeach is brain science and the future of education. And what they don't talk about in here is technology, but what they do talk about in here are the things we should and shouldn't do and why. And then I put my brain on it and go, oh, you know what? If we're not supposed to do that, this is what we should be doing. Or if we're supposed to do this, we should use Flipgrid for that. That's the perfect thing. And Flipgrid for the students to tell me about their learning. But the cognitive research tells us stuff like having students reconstruct what they know through alternative assessments leads to deeper understanding and consolidates learning in more powerful ways than traditional testing. Cognitive research from this book also tells us that there are 13 things teachers shouldn't do. And I have those 13 things up on my website, but one of them is the number one thing that teachers should not do, Matt, is pop quizzes for a grade. Now, if you're listening, put in the chat, why do you think we shouldn't do pop quizzes for a grade? Why is that out of our thing now? And what could we do instead? And we'll watch those come up. But I think, obviously, the anxiety of a pop quiz doesn't allow your neurons to fire and make those synapses you need to remember things, because they're firing on the anxiety instead. They're over there dealing with your anxiety, and they're not going to remember that information. Informative assessment, although we think it's to inform us, we need to get out of our way, and it's to form memory. It's so that students can form memory. And they're not going to form memory in a high anxiety situation in which they're being graded. So sorry. I'm on a like soapbox today because I just got done training all day.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I'm a big believer in that too. Cognitive science, brain research, what it tells us, and there's so much of it out there, and there's so many authors that are starting to cross it over into the educational world, and it's a big part of the keynote speeches that I do. I just did one today where I said, when we know how our brain prefers to learn, we can learn smarter instead of harder. So. I've seen a handful of questions about this in the comments. I don't have access to view the files. Holly and I accidentally dropped a Google Drive link into the comments, and I think everybody's trying to click on it, and it's private. It was just a mistake, and we can't go delete that comment. So sorry about that. If anybody else is looking at that, then that's all that is. So, we've covered a handful of things so far in our.
Oh, there it is. You guys are gonna get the link to this slideshow. Sorry, Matt. And you'll have the complete list of the things that you shouldn't do. I should have been looking. And why pop quizzes are on there. Also, we do pop quizzes so we can see if students got work done. And that's not really what teaching is about. If they didn't get something done, we have to find a different way of finding that out. Anyway.
Yeah,
I'll absolutely.
Be quiet. Love what Debbie says down here. She says, pop quizzes give me anxiety. Imagine how my kids would feel. Exactly. Yeah, totally agree with that. So like I was saying, we've covered a bunch so far in life after remote learning, the one-to-one classroom in 2021. We've talked about how, paperless is not a pedagogy. Just going digital doesn't change anything about the learning. We've talked about the importance of digital citizenship, building that firm foundation that you will build the rest of your year on. We've talked about being consistent with the technology. If you use it little by little every day, you start to build that muscle and understand how it works. And then Holly was just talking about how it dovetails so nicely with all of the cognitive science research that's out there. And so now I think Holly's going to go on to how we can use technology to go beyond just using text-only answers, right?
So let's talk about that thing where we were talking about, and I have someone at my door who can hear me talking, and so pardon me, but text-only answers. So let's go back to what I was talking about. And when we first get technology, we say to ourselves, what can I do with this technology? And we're focusing in on us. So some things people do is they might take a multiple choice test or a worksheet and put it into a Google form. And that Google form is taking what you were doing, and I'm just going to pick on 1985, and now putting it in mixing it in with technology. But has the learning been upped? It hasn't. But here is an example of where we can go beyond text-only answers or multiple choice questions. So let's imagine that you give a kid a test on Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, and what you're doing is getting them ready to be able to take multiple choice tests. So there's some value there. But now imagine that you go over to Flipgrid or Screencastify or somewhere where I can record my thinking. And you ask the kids to tell you everything they learned about that unit or whatever you're testing them on that wasn't on that test. And so they have to go over and explain the things that they learned that you might not have been able to grab, and you're not getting the full picture of their learning. Another thing that could happen, like as a language arts teacher, I'm having students read, and I want to make sure they read chapters 2 and 3. So my first instinct is to give a pop quiz and see if they read about those 2 chapters. But instead, what if I went to Flipgrid? And instead of text-based answers, I had each kid, before we start reading chapter 4, tell me everything they remember about chapter 2 and 3. You can't get away with faking your reading, and then I'm going to know. And I can go back and talk to that student later, but that's how I can quickly gather that without being like, I'm giving you a pop quiz. You've got to know these multiple choice questions. There may be some anxiety because they haven't done the reading, and maybe they won't let that happen again. I also want to just point out that you shouldn't grade, and that's why it says pop quizzes for a grade. And I have, as a teacher, working with another teacher, she wants to have grades in the grade book, and she's right. We need them for parents. So instead of grading quizzes or formative assessments, we do a, did you get it done or did you not grade? And we also allow for them to make those up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you were talking about asking students to just kind of like recall everything that they remember. I love that strategy for two reasons. Number one, I feel like a lot of times traditional quizzes play a game of gotcha. You know what I mean? A game of gotcha where
It
it's
is.
like, here are these 10 questions and you've got to answer these 10 questions. Oh, you didn't remember number 6? Gotcha. That's the one that you didn't remember. We're doing that in the opposite direction, I feel like, of what we should be doing. Instead of punishing what they don't remember, we should be rewarding what they do remember. And so when we give them an opportunity kind of free recall like that, I think that's a better indication of what students have learned. But what it also does, we were talking about that brain science earlier, being able to recall from our memory strengthens our long-term memory. It's the strategy from cognitive science called retrieval. If you retrieve things out of your long-term memory, it strengthens those synapses and helps you to remember them for the long term. So
I just
all
did
good stuff.
Today on recall, Matt. It was like I freaked out, and on Twitter it's kind of going a little viral because I was doing a brain dump with teachers that I was training, and I asked them to recall everything we had done in the last 2 days, and we did it on Jamboard. And then I had them go using the sticky notes, find other ones that other people did and add those to their Jamboards, like things that they recalled. And then we went to Flipgrid, and Flipgrid now has this thing called backdrop. So whatever's on my screen can become my backdrop, and it can make me small. And so I can be a student who's talking about what I just did on Jamboard. And I have the text that's on Jamboard because I use text-based answers there. But I'm now going to Flipgrid. And we call these, by the way, this is where we're going next, little small digital upgrades. Now I'm taking it into Flipgrid. I'm putting my Jamboard behind me, and I'm talking about what I learned. Instead of just having those sticky notes with things that I'm recalling. Now I'm telling you everything I recalled, as well as having that up. So that's the little upgrade. The upgrade was putting into Jamboard, doing recall, which I could have had them write in on a piece of paper. Now I'm having it with sticky notes. I also had them color code the sticky notes based on the area that they were recalling. And then I had them collaborating with each other. And so I'm upgrading. Now I'm going into Flipgrid. I'm upgrading. And guess who couldn't do that? My 1985 teacher could have never in her wildest dreams done this kind of magical, masterful pedagogy.
Exactly. Leslie had a question, Holly, by the way, with your Flipgrid to go beyond the text-only answers. Do they complete the Flipgrid about the chapters in class the next day or at home the night before? What would you suggest as far as the timing?
So it could be either or, but I'd want it to be in unison no matter what I picked. But sometimes I have students who will be like, our internet was out, and that's the new, my dog ate my homework, right?
Right.
So because it's only like a 1-minute process, I can have that on the board as the bell ringer. And they could just go in and go to the side of the room and pick a quiet area and do it that way. Or they can do it as homework.
Yeah. Do you ever check the recordings for evidence of meeting the success criteria? Do you check it to make sure that it makes sense, right?
I sometimes check them. And to be honest with you, sometimes I don't, because I teach middle school and there's 100 kids. And if I watched 100 videos every time I checked on it, that would be a bit much. But here's what I do. I go into Book Creator, which is one of my favorite apps, and the app I think most people aren't using and should be. And I have kids compile a little book of their learning. And they might bring in artifacts from Flipgrid saying, and they have success criteria that they each have. And I'm saying to them, prove to me you learned this. And so they can go into Flipgrid and look at their activity in their past videos, download that video and put it into Book Creator. And when they turn in this book to me, of what they've learned, it's kind of like them saying, okay, Ms. Clark, here's me proving to you, almost like a dissertation, that I've learned these things. And so it's kind of like a little tiny portfolio. I can't do that every time because it's a lot of work for students to put all those and find them. But on big things I need them to remember, I do.
Yeah. And, going back to that, I like the idea of, there's lots of different strategies you can go with, students being able to check each other's stuff as well. So then that way the whole lift isn't on the teacher. But then there's also this, we were talking about that retrieval practice earlier. if we're having students do kind of like a brain dump where they're just trying to recall everything that they can remember about something, the research tells us that when that's done ungraded, it leads to even better long-term memory than if it's graded. Again, it's going back to that anxiety thing that Holly was talking about, which does, it triggers the amygdala. The amygdala is your lizard brain, that causes you to start using all of these brain resources on like, oh my goodness, am I safe? Is anything going to get me? Is there a saber-toothed tiger that's going to jump out of the woods and eat me? Like it's that little lizard brain. And whenever we've calmed that, then we can allocate more brain resources. But in this case, the reason I bring that up is that if they're doing one of those brain dumps, just the act of doing it causes the learning.
Yeah.
The act of getting feedback on it and having a teacher put a grade on it and all of that doesn't affect the amount of learning that's happening up here. The act of actually doing the brain dump itself does. So that's something you could ask yourself too, is whenever you ask students to do this kind of stuff.
Let me share this really quickly. And I haven't done this before, but let me share my screen. And I'm not going to be able to see us really quick, but I'm going to show you this brain dump that we did today. And so they were, I'm just going to use mine. So I put some things that I could remember because I was working along with them, the things that we had learned in the last 2 days. And you see these green ones? These are ones I gathered from other people. I went and looked at other people's brain dumps and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. And here's someone doing the no pop quizzes or whatever. But then you can see those other ones that I got from someone else actually became these are the ones I'm going to talk about in my Flipgrid. Now I'm rearranging them and things like this. And so there's movement, there's critical thinking, which ones are the most important to me. And so we brain dumped using these. We went and looked at other people's and we grabbed what they were saying that we had forgotten about and we put those in green. And so now there's all of this stuff happening. And then when we're done, we are going into Flipgrid. We also went to the end of this Jamboard, and I'm going to unshare this, but we also went to the end of this Jamboard and we looked for patterns. What patterns did we see? Everyone talked about Flipgrid. What other patterns do we see? What connections can we make? So we were doing multidimensional thinking, even when we were done with that recall. And we really broke it down and said, this is how kids remember things. If I had given them a worksheet and said, tell me the stuff you remembered, circle A, B, or C, or D, there wouldn't be that that kind of learning happening.
Mm-hmm. There's the tweet, by the way. I just found it and put it up here. This is what Holly was talking about, where you take something like a Jamboard and you can kind of like overlay yourself over the top of it using Flipgrid, where you use it's the backdrops, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that what you said it was. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that up there real quick. So
those are little upgrades that we were talking about.
Absolutely. So we've covered, as we continue to work our way through remote life after remote learning, the one-to-one classroom in 2021. We've talked about how paperless isn't a pedagogy, how we can't leave out the digital citizenship to be consistent with the technology. We talked about the brain science, the cognitive science research, using technology to go beyond text-only answers, and then just recently making small digital upgrades. So what do we got next?
So I'm obsessed with this history teacher. Her name is Amanda Sandoval. She's up here in Orange County in California, where I live. And she has this choice board. And I love it. It's beautiful. It looks good. When I pass this out to kids, they like it. But the one thing that I have changed with this particular choice board are a couple things. And I don't actually you can't link to them. But when I'm having students do, let's say the first one says, create an infographic. I have to have taught my students how to do an infographic prior to this. I can't just be like, hey, create an infographic. Good luck on that. Or I can give a mentor text of what it looks like, a video on how to do it with some breaking down of what looks good. But I see this a lot when I travel to schools. I see a lot of people are really into choice boards and they're trying to give kids choice, but they haven't taught them how to do it. So first you got to break it down and do it. Then it can become a choice.
Yes.
And you will notice that also at the end, and you're going to hear me always talk about this, my last one is explain your thinking. If you made an infographic, awesome. Tell me everything about why you chose that infographic, why you chose the icons you did. I want to hear about your thinking and your learning journey, no matter which of these you do. I want to hear about it in Flipgrid at the end.
You know, Holly, I've always believed that the whole that one simple phrase, explain your thinking, is teacher gold, because it's the kind of stuff that we love because it's low prep. You can add explain your thinking in one little line to just about any activity. And it doesn't take any extra time for us. But what does it do? It kicks up the critical thinking. You know, we're starting to climb up the levels of Webb's depth of knowledge in that critical thinking just by doing the simple question. Tell me why you answered that way. Explain your thinking when we do that. And it's something that we can start plugging into all different sorts of assignments to get that deeper critical thinking. And you know how much extra time it takes us? 2 seconds.
Yeah.
That's it. 2 seconds.
And it can be home.
Yeah. Jennifer asked earlier, have you or would you be willing to share the Digital Citizenship Explorer board that you shared earlier?
So we're going to be sharing these slides, which has a link to it. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about digital citizenship. It's also on my blog at hollyclark.org. But yes, we're going to share. We're going to actually send you an email after this that has the link to the slides. So you'll have links to the things that are in there, like the 13 unconscionables that you should never do. By the way, this killed teachers I was working with today. Number 2 is never start your class by going over homework.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that before. Like those first 5 minutes are like the golden 5 minutes where you have kids' absolute most attention. And why in the world would you burn your absolute most attention by going over homework assignments?
You just killed the spirit of the kid who didn't get it done, who might not have gotten it done because their parent is sick or getting divorced and they're fighting or whatever it is. They didn't get it done and you just killed their spirit. So your class is over for them.
Yeah, anyway. Exactly.
So they talk about it in there so you can see.
Yes. So you will be getting that.
Yeah. And one of the things about what we were talking about with the choice boards is when you tell kids to do an infographic, creativity needs constraints. It loves constraints. And so that's why apps like I love Adobe Spark Video, which has constraints. They can't spend all of this time doing major video production. We have to remember that and also allow them to try it before it becomes a choice. So what happened there? Why are we getting people's emails? Okay, we're going to eat. Oh, you guys aren't on the email. You maybe just got.
We'll put them on it.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll get it figured out. Yeah.
So, so next is you, Matt.
Yes, that's right. So as we continue to march our way through things to consider in our life after remote learning with the one-to-one classroom in 2021, there's this, and it has to do with, that's okay. It has to do with our learning management system. And see, when you think about the one-to-one classroom, so often the learning management system goes hand in hand with it, doesn't it? And a lot of times when it comes to training on your one-to-one devices, a lot of times the lion's share of the professional development time comes on your learning management system. We got to learn how to make assignments in Google Classroom. We got to learn how to share things in Canvas. We got to learn how to set up our class in Microsoft Teams. And, you know, whatever your learning management system is, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, Canvas, Schoology, Blackboard, Alma. I mean, there's all sorts of them these days. It's good to understand the purpose of why it exists. This is key to the whole one-to-one classroom in 2021. Because, see, a lot of times whenever I talk about learning management systems, I hear people ask me, do you have any good activities for Google Classroom? Do you have any good Google Classroom assignments? When I hear them ask for Google Classroom assignments, I start to realize there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And it all has to do with the place of the learning management system. And the best way for me to do that is through this little analogy. Holly, will you play along with me on this analogy? Okay, Holly, I would love for you, and if you're watching this, you can actually, if you're watching this, it would be kind of fun for you to drop in the comments what your answer to this question is.
Yes.
Okay, so Holly, I want you to think of your ideal vacation. I know it's kind of unfair now that the school year is starting to roll back around for me to start talking about vacations during back to school time, but I'm going there. So, if you had to think of an ideal vacation, again, we're going to be watching in the comments. We want to see. Do you have one, Holly?
I do.
Where is it?
So right now it's Sydney, Australia, because they have Vivid Sydney where they light up the whole city, and it's over in 3 days. So I need to get there in 3 days.
Okay, you're gonna have to hustle, and that plane ride is a killer. I've been to Sydney once; it was gorgeous. I loved it. Okay, so I want you to picture your ideal vacation, just in your mind for a second. Debbie's thinking about the beach. So I want you to just picture what it looks like.
Machu Picchu.
Ileana's saying Machu Picchu. Yeah, that is a legit answer right there. Okay, so now that you've thought about this vacation, I got to ask you a question. In all of your dreams about this vacation, did you ever picture the airport?
God, no.
Right? Yeah. Usually when you're envisioning a cabin in the woods or Hawaii or Egypt, Egypt, that's impressive. Chris said a library. I love it. Are you usually picturing the airport, Jennifer's like? Nope. Okay.
Especially if you live in Dallas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. DFW is a scary place. It's like a city. Here's the connection to the learning management system. Here's why I bring all of this up. Your learning management system is like the airport. It's a means to an end. It's a way of getting someplace. See, whenever you get all of those devices, the best stuff for creating digital assignments most of the time is not in the learning management system. You have the wealth of the entire internet around you. So all of a sudden, your learning management system becomes like the airport. Take Google Classroom, for example. If you use your Google Classroom assignment as a link off to an article, as a link off to Flipgrid or off to Adobe Spark or off to Book Creator or off to Screencastify or whatever digital tool you want students to create in, it's a means to an end. It's a way to get to a destination. When you see your learning management system that way, it starts to change the way that you look at assignments. So no longer are you looking at Google Classroom and going, this is it, assignments, and it's docs and slides and sheets. That's all they give me. When you stop thinking of it that way and you start thinking of what can I link out to, that's like the destination that you're flying to. When you understand the purpose of your learning management system in that way, it starts to broaden your horizons and open up your mind about what kind of assignments you can do through that learning management system.
That's exactly right. And also, you want to think that things that are going into your LMS are going behind the wall. And sometimes students need to see each other's responses. So I often go to something like Padlet to have them turn things in, like a video they made or an Adobe Spark page that they made so they can see each other's. Otherwise, they never get to see the work of the other students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, Debbie's loving the airport. She says that's a great illustration, Matt. So hard for teachers to understand when they first start using an LMS. Yep, they're looking for tools or lessons. Absolutely. And the tools and lessons are kind of like the destination, and the learning management system gets you out there. Absolutely. So all of this stuff that we've been talking about, helping you kind of make the most of your one-to-one classroom, trying to figure out what life after remote learning is about and the strategies and the tips and all of that stuff. I don't know if you could tell, but this is kind of me and Holly's jam. This is what we get out of bed to do every single day. We absolutely adore getting to support you all in this kind of work and providing resources and just, kind of being your sidekick as educators. And we get to go to schools sometimes and do this. But the sad part about that is whenever we go to school, a lot of times it's kind of like a one-shot deal. We go in and we give all of the suggestions and advice and tips and tricks that we can, and then we have to leave at the end of the day. And that's it. And we've always been looking for a way that we can be a constant support. I mean, if you've ever thought about it, wouldn't it be nice if you had somebody by your side kind of all throughout the school year? giving you new ideas, giving you suggestions and strategies, answering your questions, maybe even making some things for you that you can use in the classroom, that kind of thing. Holly and I have been dying to do this. And so that's why we created what you see over here on the screen. That's why we created the Drive. And so let me tell you about the Drive real quick. The Drive is this place where Holly and I get to do that kind of support every single day all throughout the school year to the people who decide to join it. And so what we do inside of it is a number of things. First of all, you know how a lot of the things that we talked about in this presentation are tied back to research, right? See, Holly and I are kind of research nerds. We have huge stacks but you can see a bunch of the books behind me right there. She's going to start. Yeah. She's probably got some within reach.
Oh, I do.
Yeah. And one of our favorite things to do is to pore over the research that can help you in the classroom and then make it easy to understand in bite-sized pieces and applicable so that you can start applying it into your classroom right away. Another thing that we love to do is to create resources that you can plug into your class, like templates. You saw Holly using Jamboard earlier. We love making Jamboard templates that you can use with your students. If there's any other sort of like digital resource that you'd like to be able to assign to kids, we love to be able to help with that. What we also like to do is kind of like help unpack some of this stuff. And so within the Drive, we have these daily audio shows that you can listen to on the way to school. That's part of the reason that very short. Yeah, only like 5 minutes at a time or something. That's part of the reason that we called it the Drive. It was, we've got these little audio shows that you can listen to on your way to school. We always felt like, you know, almost all teachers or educators have a commute. And what if we could use that commute as our superpower? What if we could use that as our way to be better at what we do? And so that's why we've got, there it is. Yep, there it is right there. I'm pointing the wrong way. There. But we've got these audio shows that you can listen to where Holly and I join you every single day and give you little snippets of that research, little ideas you can use in your classroom, little suggestions, little things like that. And then we also pair it all together with a community. See, we like to take all of the people that are members of the Drive and put them all together in one group, one digital community where they can share ideas with each other, where we can ask you questions, where we can all kind of work together. Because, of course, we are all better together. And Holly and I like to share things, but you've got things to share too. And so when it comes to all of this, actually, I got to put Amber's comment on here. Amber, I was hoping you were still watching because Amber's a member of the Drive. And she says it's so much fun. Don't hesitate, join. It's so fun and you will learn so much. So if at this point you're watching this and you're going, okay, this sounds really interesting. How do I join the Drive? What is this all about and everything? So we want to share something with you real quick. This is the best place for you to find it. You can go straight over to our website. In fact, I'm going to put it in the comments so you can just click on it. So it's thedrive.online, where you can get more information about what it is and you can find out how to join. And that's the place that you want to go to be able to, to get that information. One thing to know is that we let new members into the Drive only a couple of times a year. And right now is one of those times. And basically, you've got just about a week before we close the doors for the fall cohort.
Less than a week. Less than a week, I think.
You're right. Yeah, we're going to close those doors on September 2nd.
Okay. Okay, sorry, wrong. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. So we're going to close those doors on September 2nd. What we like to do is bring in a group of people so we can get to know each other and we can do the work together throughout the semester. And so it kind of makes sense to only let them in every so often. So we wanted to tell you about this at the end of this little webinar here because A, it ties in so nicely to what all of this was about. Because it's kind of like continuing to do that work all together with me and with Holly and with the other members. But B, because time's running out and you've only got about a week left before you can join.
And then doors are closed. Well, I just want to say that, so we do those research cheat sheets, we call them, and they just summarize everything. And the thing that I'm working on right now for our first month is digital citizenship cheat sheet. Like, no, most people are just getting these devices. And even if you're just getting them, no one taught us in any teaching school about digital citizenship. And if they did, it was very small. We're also, and I'm so passionate about this, looking at who our learners are from Gen Z to Alpha Gen. What characteristics do they have? How are they different? How can we meet their needs? And so I've done all the research on these two things, and you're going to get that cheat sheet along with all kinds of ways that you can implement digital citizenship in your classroom, even if you've already started school, how you can, what apps we can use to do certain things that will meet the needs of Gen Z. And so this little radio or podcast that we do, for 5 minutes, I'll tell you a little bit about that research. Matt and I will. And let's say you can't listen to it every day. That's a bit much. You don't need Matt and I every day. You can on Friday or on Monday. Listen to 25 minutes of it because it's only Monday through Friday and get it done. And it'll also tell you what we just added to the drive. So you won't be like, oh my gosh, it's too much. I don't know what's going on. I can't find. It's not that you'll do something every day. It's that week 1 will be research with templates. Week 2 will be tutorials. Like someone asked in here if I had a student example of this book creator that I do. Absolutely. And I share it in here. So, yeah. So that's what it looks like. And for Matt and I, we want to say also, you know, we don't get to have those relationships with teachers when we go to a school and we're like, okay, bye. Like today, I'm really close with these teachers now. I've been training them for 2 days and I'm going to train them tomorrow. When I'm done, I'm going to be like, okay, well, have a good school year.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just spent 3 days with them and I never get to see them again. It's sad for me and Matt.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Now, if you've got any questions that you want to ask us, this is a good time to do it. We'll, as we're sort of wrapping this up, feel free to ask anything that you've got. I did drop those links into Facebook and to YouTube. So feel free to go jump in there. I promise we didn't pay Amber off to say all these nice things about it, but she is a member and she's been a great part of this community. And she says, you want to be a part of this. Matt and Holly's resources are fantastic. You'll immediately start doing amazing things with your students. You'll love the podcasts. So inspiring. That's so cool. So, and then Debbie says, one-to-one terrifies me. I'm in my 32nd year and I'm in 2nd grade. And as I said before, we just got our laptops today and I worry that I won't do what needs to be done. I'll gladly join your group to get some positive help. I tell you what, you wouldn't just be getting help from me and Holly. You would be getting help from, dozens, potentially hundreds. We've got lots of people joining pretty much every single day, but people from really all over the United States and all over the world. So like you said,
last time, like 22 countries or something. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. And you said you're in 2nd grade, and that's the beauty of the community too, is that we always have somebody who's at varying levels and content areas and everything. So being able to match you up with somebody who's in your similar situation, that's kind of really what it's all about. And of course, when you ask a question, you get answers from me and Holly, but you also get answers from the communities too. So makes...
Sorry, Matt, but you know what I used to not like to do? I used to not like to go ask people in my school building questions because I didn't want them to know that I didn't know something. And so like this community would have been amazing. As our other person who's had a one-to-one for over 20 years in here knows, we didn't have any blogs. We didn't have anyone to help us. And I just had to figure it out. And sometimes it was scary. But now you have other teachers who doing the same thing, but maybe in New York and you live in California, which is kind of cool.
Yes, absolutely. So, all right. Well, I think we've covered some of the questions. You've gotten some ideas. We did say that we were going to drop the link for the slides in. So I'm going to do that right now. So feel free to check it out.
You're going to get an email with them, and we'll remind you in case you're like tonight, not ready. We'll remind you a few days before it closes and right before it closes. So if you want to join, if you join and you still get those emails, please forgive us, but we'll remind you. And we're so looking forward to having you as friends. Like you have no idea.
Yes. I want to close real quick with this comment from Amber. She says, teachers from all over the world. I got great ideas from a teacher in Hong Kong who teaches ESL to high school students. Wow. It was applicable to my 5th grade classroom in California. So these are the kinds of connections that you get to make. She says, will this thread be open long enough to click links? Yeah. If you hang on to the link for this video, you can always come back and re-look at the comments. And then if there's something that, if there's something in those comments that you can't get to, feel free to shoot either me or Holly an email or a message on social media or something. We're happy to get you whatever you need. So,
and one last thing, Matt, interestingly enough, we have a bunch of school districts joining. So that's an interesting way to, like, if you don't want to pay for it on your own, and it's not super expensive, it's less than a teacher pay teacher thing a month, or
yes,
like a coffee, but you can also go to your district and say, like, we should get people in here. So that's also an option.
Yeah, definitely. We've got a spot on the website where if a school district or a school wants to look into a package to get a discount for all of their teachers or a big bunch of their teachers, then, we can certainly make that happen too. So if you haven't already, there's the link right there. Go check it out, thedrive.online, where you can get all the information, where you can get signed up. And we're super excited about this. We really hope that we get to see you in this membership and that we get to build those relationships, that Holly and I get to support you throughout the school year. We get to kind of be like your personal teacher coaches along with the other people in the community. I think you'll find it super supportive and super helpful. So we really hope that we get to meet you there. So any last words, Holly?
No.
Awesome.
I'm excited.
All right. Yes, me too. You all are the best. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you soon. All right. Take care.